Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, ladies and gents, today I have Joe Gamaldi. Joe, thanks for being on the show, man.
No, man, no problem. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to continue and revisit a lot of our prior conversation. But for the listeners, if you're not familiar with Joe, why do I have you on? Man, so many reasons. Like just learning more about you. You're a dude in his 40s, a family man who's doing it right, focusing on family. You're focusing on health. I think that a lot of times when we think about health and fitness, we think about glory days and we think about yesteryear, but really the goal should be like the future, right? And so I think that it's worth highlighting someone that is not only a cop, not only a first responder, not only a family man and a father, but not only someone that's, invested and engaged with other ventures, to help the greater good, like the FOP, and we'll get into that, but also you're crushing it, man. So I intend this to be a mentoring session for the masses and a masterclass.
Oh, well, thanks, man. I'll give you that $20 for saying all those nice things about me
Yeah,
there.
sweet,
Uh,
sweet, yeah.
yeah, my fitness journey is kind of, I've always been into working out. I've always been into, making sure that I take care of myself. But I really started to dial it in about the last 3 years or so and, call it a midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it. But
Dude,
um,
whatever works, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Whatever motivates you, right? So for me, it was just like the average life expectancy for a police officer is 58 or 59 years old. We're also 50% more likely to take our lives than the general public. And it was just for me, I was like, I have to get as healthy as I can possibly be. And I think a lot of people are always struggling, like, what is that motivation? How do you get the discipline? All these other things. And it's like, find out what in your life motivates you to get into the best shape that you can possibly be. And for me, it's my kids. I have two daughters, and I want to be around when they're older. I want to be
Mhm.
around if they have kids, and I want to be around the grandkids. And I don't want to just be sitting in a chair, though. I want to be running around Disneyland, following them around. I want to be down on the floor playing with them. I want to play an active role well into my 60s and 70s. And people really need to start asking, and I think it's Dr. Peter Attia that does this. It says, what do you want the last decade of your life to look like? And
Yeah.
when you really start thinking about it that way, you're like, holy shit, like I need to make sure that I'm in the best shape I can be. I don't want to spend the last 10 years in a nursing home or not being able to walk or not being able to enjoy all the things that I want to do with my kids and my grandkids. So that was like a real big motivating factor for me. Just getting older, and you really want to try to age with grace.
Yeah, I think that's huge, and I've been known to say for my smaller circles, like I would prefer to croak at, and I don't like to say 60 because that is really creepy soon, but like,
Yeah.
I, let's say 70, 80. Like I'd rather just go, but be at like my best self, right? Like not be hindered by any mobility or not have anything I can't do. Than be in my 90s and just like you said, like in a chair or be hooked up to things and bags. And no, it's like, no, I want to be peak, right? Whatever time I have, I want to be able to do things with it.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think the next question that people always ask me is like, I've always been an advocate for law enforcement, and, I've done hundreds of national news interviews, and I'm very out there with that stuff. But when I really started putting out health and fitness stuff, a lot of people ask me like, oh, why did you decide to do this? Like, what was the impetus to like want to share it with people? And for me, it was just, I was seeing a lot of retired officers and officers who had left the departments who were on Instagram, and they were like selling an ebook or they're selling their, fitness coaching. And to be clear, I don't begrudge anybody that wants to start a side business and do that.
Yeah, yeah,
But a lot of the angle I was seeing was, is they were telling police officers, you're a fat piece of shit and you're going to die, and your partner's going to die, and you're going to let your family down all because you're fat. And I'm like, whoa, I'm not really sure this is the message that we should be putting out to police officers, and also buy my product. So,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
fat and you're out of shape, buy my product. But I just wanted to say, there's a lot of people who just don't know. They don't
Mhm.
know how to get in shape. They don't
Yeah.
know how to eat right. I know I've learned more about nutrition in the last 3 years than I knew my entire life. So I just decided, you know what? Screw this. I'm not trying to make a dollar. I'm just going to put it out for free.
Yeah, we
So
need that.
yeah. So I just started putting out videos and putting out different recipes, and the feedback has just been phenomenal. And not so much like publicly, like a couple people will leave comments here and there,
Yeah.
but in the DMs,
Mhm.
they just send in stuff like, thank you so much for this. And I appreciate this recipe, or thanks, keep posting this. I just got a request the other day. They're like, hey, could you do a video on creatine? And I was like, for
Mm.
sure, I'll do a video this week and I'll get
Yeah,
it out there. And then I'm also getting like these success stories where they're like,
that's huge.
started following your stuff. I've lost 45 pounds. And I'm like, holy shit, that's awesome. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that motivates me to keep doing it.
Yeah, and it's so huge. And we talked about that a little bit before where, my crossover was starting Blue Grit Wellness literally in the physical wellness space, right? Like fitness, nutrition, and then also peer support, right? The mental side. Because I would be hit up so many times, either by my colleagues or just people that I interacted with, like, hey, what do you do? Right. Like, my friends from college or my friends from work, and hey, what do you do? And what, any tips? So it's just to scale it, right? So it's just a way to share, right? This works for me, or this didn't work for me. But I think yes, and like we need people putting out good info because it's so dizzying. Like the fitness space, and it's all built around the model of do something. Not all. Let me caveat that because there have been
Well,
people
we
on
have
the
to
show.
caveat it because we're going
Yeah,
to be on the internet.
you
It's,
gotta
it's
kid
fine.
you gotta caveat everything. But no, there's so many good, solid people, well intended, that have been on my show, or that I've interacted with, that yeah, they take a pretty moderate approach, or they say, hey, there's different ways, this is my way. And yeah, I don't fault anyone for wanting to make a buck, because if you need time and specified attention, like that takes time. And man, Joe, you could coach 10 people for free on your own time, but you really, then it just takes away from your family, right? And you got a full-time job plus. And so I love all of the positivity and just trying to create that, because yeah, a lot of fitness models, to go back, like the regime models, I suppose, are built around the prospect of failure after 30, 60, 90 days. It's all based and rooted in studies. And so if you fail this extreme thing, then I can get you to rebuy this other thing when you fail. So I like your approach, man, and I like the information you're putting out there.
Yeah, and studies have shown too, like when you talk about trying to shame people into getting in shape, it doesn't work. And in fact, it has the opposite effect.
Mm,
You actually remove a lot of the motivation that they have to try to work out. And they actually end up overeating because they're sympathy eating, and that's where they go for their comfort, is for food, because you've made them feel bad. Now, there is a small segment of the population that like that shaming is going to work. And like, if that works for you, that's fine. I'm just saying that for the wide range of us, that is not going to work. And what I try to do is just keep it really simple for folks. Like, if you are trying to lose weight, you have to be at a calorie deficit. Those are going to be the law of thermodynamics. So you figure out how many calories you burn in a day, and then you're going to want to stay about 500 underneath that. There's 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. You'll lose a pound of fat a week if you stick with it. Now, everybody will come to me and say, well, what about intermittent fasting and keto and carnivore and this and the other thing? And what I will tell people is, if it works for you, then like, do you. Like, if you're
yeah.
successful and you're losing weight, like, that's fine. But for the majority of people, restrictive diets are not going to work, studies have shown, because you're denying yourself all those little treats and all those things that you love to eat, donuts, pizza, that type of stuff. You're denying yourself all of those things. So I just suggest to people it's much easier to just be at a calorie deficit, and then you will still lose the weight. And not only that, all of those diets that I just talked about, they're all designed to just keep you in a calorie deficit. They just don't say that because,
Hmm.
as you just referred to, they're selling you a product. And that product doesn't work if they say, well, oh, by the way, if you just stay at a calorie deficit, you'll get the exact same results. They
Right.
have to sell their thing. So I just try to tell people, if you can get into this calorie deficit, you can still eat everything you want to eat, but you're going to need to focus on nutritious, protein dense foods. Reason being is that if you're eating at a calorie deficit, you can only eat so much. So you might as well try to eat as much volume as possible and prioritize protein. Now, ideally, you want to get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight that you have. That's going to make you feel satiated, make you feel fuller for longer. But also, while you're losing the fat, if you're eating enough protein, you're going to maintain the muscle that you have while you're working out and doing your resistance training.
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, like you put a lot of info out there, and I just want to circle back on a couple things. Yeah, some people are like, "Hey, it's only calories," and I hate that because we don't live in a vacuum, right? And
Yeah.
there's so many things that like the different nutritious elements and the different things you're eating will affect your metabolism differently, and that could be specific, like genetic, that could be lifestyle
Mhm.
based and stress based and all these things. But like, it is an awesome guide to start, right? Like you can get a free calorie counter, like MyFitnessPal is what I've used in the past, and
Yep.
it was so eye-opening of like what is in your food or how much of what you get, right? So you're talking about protein, prioritizing protein. I think that's, if I had five things I'd rattle off of strategies, that's one of them amongst what you already hit on, right? Eat actual food because it's going to
Mhm.
be more nutritious and it's going to fill you up. It's going to control your blood sugar, like all these, kind of energy dips that we know if we just think about it, even absent nutritional knowledge. If you're like, man, if I eat this like sugar, I'm going to crash and I'm going to get hangry. I'm going to lose energy. And so I'm going to be back at it. Right. Like we've all been there. So, yeah, man, you hit a lot of points so quickly that's why I want to kind of circle back and just tell people like, yeah, if it works for you, it works, right? There are some
Yeah.
people on the internet, you can find them like they've been doing carnivore for 10, 20 years and their markers are great. Cool. Maybe talk to your doc. If your doc is not super terrified of it, you can kind of navigate through it, but you might have exactly the wrong panels to approach a diet that's high fat, high protein, high saturated fat, right? Because that's what it
Yeah.
is. And it's just so polarizing out there. So I think you do have to find what works for you. If you've had a tendency to binge eat, maybe intermittent fasting and narrowing your window down to, 6 or 8 hours a day of eating, or 4 hours a day, or one meal. Maybe that's not helpful for someone with a history of binge eating because you're
Mhm.
essentially encouraging yourself to binge. And I could put down 3,000 calories in one meal for sure, right? So does that actually put you at the deficit that Joe's
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, and like for me, like if I don't eat every like 4 to 5 hours, I'm like ravenous. You want to
Mm,
talk about like hangry? Like I can feel it coming on. So for like me, intermittent fasting is not going to work. I just it's not going to happen. But what I try to preach to people is, if it works for you, then
hmm
great. But here's just a host of options. Try to figure it out. And what I try to tell people too is, if you're going to do a calorie deficit, if you focus like weighing your food. I know that sounds like completely crazy to people because you got a little scale
Yeah.
but I weigh my food, and you can call me a psycho, that's fine. But you don't realize that sword cuts both ways. You don't realize how much you can eat when you're
hmm
doing like turkey breast, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and all of a sudden you have like a plate that is a massive plate of food for like 400 calories. And you're like, wow, I never would have even put that much food on my plate in the first place. And this is how much I can eat and it has this much protein. But
hmm
that also cuts the other way. Like if you want to have a bowl of cinnamon toast crunch, and like, how it says on the side where it's like, oh, 1 cup of cinnamon toast crunch. Like you measure that out in grams.
Yeah.
It's not that much. And you're filling up that whole bowl. And now suddenly you had a bowl of
hmm
cereal and it was like 450, 500 calories. And you don't feel full when you're done.
Yeah. One thing is like one cup is not one bowl. And then I don't know anyone, any grown adult that's gonna eat one bowl of cereal. Like
Yeah.
even if
Yeah.
it's like plain Cheerios, like there's no, I have a minimum of three bowls. And that's why I like begrudgingly like buying cereal now from, my daughter and trying to get healthier,
Yeah.
organic things with some sort of I actually add whey protein and collagen to my daughter's cereal. So I'm like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
getting something in there for her. And she has to eat something else. But man, yeah, like if I'm sitting down with that thing, it's gonna be three bowls. So just
And
knowing that.
And if you want to get really depressed, go ahead and measure out a tablespoon of peanut butter.
I was
Because
thinking, man, like I was thinking that, yeah.
yeah,
That's the thing.
when you put the tablespoon in a thing of peanut butter and just slap that, that's not the actual serving size. By the way, a nice little hack if you're trying to keep your calories low, powdered peanut butter.
Oh
You
yeah, I used
can,
to love that.
yep, you can just mix it with water. And a recent hack that I just found is if you do the powdered peanut butter with water, put a tablespoon of sugar-free syrup in it. It'll
Mm.
make it a little thicker, a little sweeter, and it'll taste just like the regular peanut butter that you normally have. And you've only added 5 calories because the sugar-free syrup is basically nothing.
Yeah, there's different brands. PB2, I think, was the first, and yeah,
Yep.
so don't get peanut flour, folks. Peanut flour is essentially just ground peanuts, not the same. So you're basically it's like almond flour, right? Super caloric, not super tasty, but yeah, PB2 or something similar. Great for a protein shake. Great for mixing into all your stuff. Yeah, great tip, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much there. I think it's just, the one theme, if you want to boil down a lot of what we already talked about, is like know thyself, right? We've
Mhm.
all had our times where something with health and nutrition like didn't go a certain way, right? Maybe we do stress eat. Maybe we do have a tendency to binge or have these unhealthy relationships with food. And so knowing that, maybe you can recognize, hey, an extreme anything, probably not the best, right? Take a more moderate approach, like do some meal planning. And just because you get a scale on Amazon for like $12 doesn't mean you have to be beholden to this lifestyle forever.
Yeah.
It'll be so influential because once you start, let's just say you're 4 or 5 days a week of work, maybe you eat essentially a similar or very similar thing where it's this much of a lean meat and this much of a starch. And then you have a sense you could even, measure it in a cup. You could measure it in, your little Tupperware. You're like, oh yeah, it's literally half of this and I eat this many times. And then you have a template, right? But if you want to dial it back in or you kind of fall out of it, maybe you pull the scale back out. And so it's just knowing where you're going, what your goal is. And I love going back way to the beginning because the goal isn't just shred season or what have you, but
Yeah.
for you, Joe, like you look long term, and I think that's just wise for us in living life. Like, what is our ultimate goal? And for you, it's like I want to be able to roll around and like, keep up at Disneyland. Like that is the thing. And so recognizing that there's all these periodic goals, right? Maybe these quarterly check-ins, maybe monthly check-ins, and then you could boil it down literally to the day of like how can my actions today or yesterday and tomorrow feed us towards that goal rather than detract from it.
Yeah, something I like to think about is like, would tomorrow me thank me for what today me did? Like I
Mm-hmm.
know it sounds kind of hokey, but it's the truth. Like if you know you're making bad decisions today about whatever it may be, like think about the long-term impact it's gonna have. So you're gonna wake up tomorrow and be like, damn, I really wish I wouldn't have done that. Really try to think about would tomorrow you thank you. And another thing too, when we talk about, losing weight and getting fit, like I'm not just talking about what this is going to do for you physically. Like, yes, of course, your blood pressure is going to go down. You're going to lose weight. You're going to look better. You're going to feel better in your clothes. All those other things. But it's the mental aspect of it that is so massive that I don't think people quantify when they think about getting in shape. You're going to feel so much better. And obviously, yes, aesthetically, you will look better, and that ultimately makes you feel better. But I mean, like, for somebody like me, like, I have anxiety and I have a ton of energy. I need to do cardio 7 days a week in order to burn that excess energy off. And
Mm,
as a result, my mind's clear. I can think clear. I'm less prone to get emotional about things like, because you can have a short fuse. If you have anxiety and you haven't burnt off that extra energy, it just keeps me at a calmer level. And I'm telling you, you will see such a benefit just by, and of course, all the chemical, serotonin's released in the brain when you work out, dopamine, all the rest of it. But I'm just saying, you're going to notice a better feeling in your mood. You're going to have more energy. You're going to be more present when you're with your kids
mhm.
because you've gotten rid of the excess energy. You've gotten a workout in. You feel better. So it's going to lead to not only more time with your kids, but better quality time or with your spouse or whoever.
Yeah.
So people need to understand that when you take that fitness, weight loss, fat loss journey, you're not just building a better physical health, you're really building a better mental health for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And that's such a good reminder that all these things are intertwined, but oftentimes I like to start small, whether it's like an unofficial coaching or when people have actually sought out coaching from me. And it's just to say, hey, let's start small. Literally, what you put in your body is going to affect everything else. Like,
Hmm.
give yourself credit, give yourself grace, but like, let's just add some more nutritious things. And that by default should displace some not so nutritious things, right? So it
Yeah.
starts there and some movement, right? A lot of times people build up the motivation, right? Something like New Year's or like a vacation's coming up and they get really revved up and like that's
Yeah.
great. Harness that. However, just to jump into 2 a days from having like inactivity is not sustainable, right? That's essentially an extreme approach again, right? So literally just moving more, you will feel better. You'll feel like, oh, I went for a 20-minute walk today. Awesome. I didn't do that for the last couple of years. Now I'm going to put something good in my body that's nourishing. And then it starts kind of snowballing on itself.
Yeah, and I think people when they first start off, they think that they need to go like crazy, like you just said. They need to do 2 days, and they do massive cardio, blah blah blah. Just get 10,000 steps.
Hmm.
Stay at a calorie deficit and get 10,000 steps a day. You will lose weight, I assure you. Now, over the long haul, you're going to want to add some sort of resistance training or body weight training. But if you are just starting from zero, get at a calorie deficit, walk 10,000 steps, which is not overly difficult throughout the day. You got to be a little intentional, but nothing
Hmm.
crazy. And you'll lose weight and then start to ramp up. And another thing, too, people get so focused on, man, New Year's resolution. I'm going to start January 1st, or I'm going to start on Monday, or there's no magic day, folks. There's no mystery to that number or whatever. Just start today. Today's the day.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
day you should start.
Yeah.
Today's the day you should start eating right and trying to get your 10,000 steps. And if you did fall off, like let's say you were, consistent for 2, 3 months and you fell off for a month, who cares? Just get right back on it. Just
Yep.
start doing it again. You've already shown yourself that you have the discipline to do it for 3 months. So continue. And like another thing I say to officers is like, it takes a whole hell of a lot of discipline and motivation to get through a police academy, to survive your career day to day, to make sure that you're doing a good job at work. You already have the discipline, the drive, the motivation. It already exists inside of you. You just got to apply it to this part of your life. You know what I mean? Like you already have it. It's right there. Just tap into it for this.
Yeah. And I love, combining that with a prior, topic was that it will make you more optimized, right? And so, a
Yeah.
lot of times we talk about safety and we talk about being sharp and like, yeah, we might at times in our career or like, some of the people listening might not be really happy where they're at physically. And that's hard. It's a hard hurdle to get over, right? But when you recognize that you want to be sharp, you want to be tactical, you want to be operationally proficient, recognizing that your brain will work better when you are putting better ingredients into your body and you're allowing, the movement, the exercise is allowing your blood to circulate more oxygen, right? Like we know that this is going to translate into saving lives, whether it's yours or someone else's on quote unquote the day, if that day comes. And who wouldn't want that, right? So again, not to make it sound insurmountable, start small, like these little things that Joe and I are throwing at you. You pick one or two for the week, but yeah, start today. I think we got to flip the YOLO narrative because most people hear YOLO and they're like, oh yeah, burn it down, right? Like we're gonna
Yeah.
party, we're gonna like have fun and abandon responsibilities, but like, yeah, you only live once, right? So make today's decisions critically helpful and constructive towards the future.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is you don't realize how easy it'll be once you get to where you want to be. Like once you get to the weight that you want to be at and you're just at like maintenance, just trying to maintain, like it's not that hard at that point. You can really enjoy and go ham, and like I'm a foodie. I love to try new restaurants and eat a bunch of stuff. And I can because I've gotten to a point now where I know I can go, ham for a weekend if I want to and dial it right back in the next week. It just pays off to get to where you want to be. You're going to end up enjoying it more. And honestly, I mean, I know that we're saying it and it's easy for us to say because we're in shape and we're in that. But like, guys and gals, I am telling you, every part of your life will get better if you get yourself into the shape that you want to be in. You will perform better at work. You will perform better as a parent. You will perform better as a spouse. You can take that as any you know any definition as you'd like to take it. You will perform better in general. How about that? Everything in your life is going to get better. Yeah, as we talked about, your mental health, and not only that, that discipline that you're showing. I've yet to meet someone who, as they went on their like fitness fat loss journey, every other aspect of their life started to get better. And
Yeah.
and that's kind of the benefits that you're going to see. It's not just that physical wellness that's going to get better.
Yeah, 100%. And whether you ever saw The Biggest Loser or, you just recognize maybe someone that worked in the fitness industry, I think it's very common for trainers to say that they, were one part, therapist in that, you're going through this journey and just, whether or not you have a trainer, but like you're your trainer or Joe is your remote trainer and when you're following along on his Instagram, right? And you're like, man, I'm going through this stuff and I'm getting confident and I'm feeling empowered. Like these are real things. And so, don't don't compare yourself, as I often sometimes do, like 10, 15 years ago. Compare yourself to like where you can get. Give yourself grace, because maybe that peak physical performance that you remember, maybe you didn't have kids, maybe you didn't have the kind of job strains that you do now. It's not to say you can't get back to a version like that, but it doesn't have to be the same, right? Maybe you're not going to put up as much weight, but you could certainly feel the best you've ever felt. Like, why not? We need to abandon the limiting beliefs that we can't have it.
Yeah, and don't always compare yourself to like fitness models you see on Instagram or movie
Like Joe.
stars because because a lot of those people are on freaking steroids or TRT or something anyway, or they got a personal trainer, personal chef. Just get in your own mind what you want to look like. Don't be so worried about what society tells you, is the perfect aesthetic that you have to have. Like, just figure out what it is for you that you want. And
Hmm.
although it's a difficult topic to talk about, like something that I always like to hit on too is alcohol.
Yeah.
Like it is very common in our culture for law enforcement to drink alcohol, and I'm not a Puritan saying you should never have a drink. So like, let's do another caveat, right? I'm not
Yeah.
saying that you can't have a drink.
Yeah.
All
Half
I'm
the cops
saying,
are shutting it off right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
hey, right now they're like, this guy, he doesn't know how we are. You know what I mean? Like, no, I'm just saying that, like, number one, everything in moderation in life. But number two, just know, like, when you're drinking like that, you're wrecking your sleep. If you are really serious about getting into shape, alcohol is going to kill your calories. So if you still want to have drinks, that's fine, but find a lower calorie alternative. Switch to the Michelob Ultra, or find the lightest calorie liquor that you can find. Be careful with the mixers. Like, all those other things are stuff you have to think about. But just ultimately know, like, alcohol is sabotaging your progress to that. And it's also, if you're using that to self medicate, you really have to make sure that you have a healthy relationship with alcohol, meaning you're not using it because you had a bad day. You're using it because, hey, I'm at a family function, people are having drinks, I'm going to have one, et cetera. Or, I'm out to dinner, I have a designated driver and I'm going to have a drink. Like, use it the way that it should be used, not as, hey, I'm having some issues right now, I'm going to turn to alcohol, because I promise you, that road does not end anywhere that you want to go. And if you are having problems with alcohol, please reach out to friends, families, whether it's peer support, whoever. Shit, call me. I don't care. I'll talk to you. But it's just really important that you consider how much alcohol you're consuming. And another stimulant that, that's a depressant, but a stimulant we need to talk about is caffeine.
Mm, yeah.
Full disclosure,
Now you're
I am
coming
going
after our
to be
bangs. What are you doing,
I'm going
man?
I'm going to be a complete hypocrite on this topic. I consume entirely too much caffeine. The recommended dose is like 400 milligrams a day. I routinely exceed it. So just so we're clear, folks. And that's roughly, by the way, about 4 to 5 cups of coffee a day or 2 energy drinks. And everybody who knows me knows I love my energy drinks. Whether it's, I love my Ghost, I love my Gorilla Mime. Just try to do it again in moderation. Try to keep it to 400 milligrams. And also try to keep it about 6 or 7 hours minimum before you plan on going to sleep, because otherwise that caffeine is going to wreck your sleep too.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Yeah, just to rewind back to alcohol, it is almost like a stigma to like challenge our alcohol, right? And that there's such a range, right? We know, and most of us in the industry probably have friends, like close friends that would be categorically alcoholic, right? And
Yeah.
so let's not shy away from that, because it is often a slippery slope where it can take you into those lower levels of mental health. And so when we already have this uphill battle about maintaining decent mental health with the chronic stress and the danger and the hypervigilance and compassion fatigue, like, let's not make it harder. And so, just to be clear, I do enjoy alcohol as well, right? But it steadily every couple of years, it's less and less, right? If I go on a trip and it's a celebration like a wedding, then I'll usually tie one off, right? But now I'm recognizing that in my age, potentially, but maybe as I just am more sensitive and more in tune with my body, if I'm in a better healthy state, like all the nutrition and the everything's kind of working out well, like that alcohol hurts a bit more, right?
Yep.
And now it's I call it like the 2 IPA hangover, where I'm not anywhere near drunk. You're a little buzzing, but then you just feel like, or you're already hung over, and it's just
Next morning you feel like shit too.
Yeah, and like I feel awful like the day of, and so now that's a thing where, and just for people that, yeah, to Joe's point, there's definitely better versions than others. I enjoy some like non-alcoholic beer now. They're making some pretty tasty ones. I had one yesterday, and it was just I just wanted that flavor. I love hops. I love the flavor, but like that was enough. I didn't need to feel buzzed or anything. I just wanted something after dinner. And it actually kept me out of, snacking and something like that. So I
Yeah,
just wanted a little bit of mouth pleasure, right? And so there are different things, your low calorie seltzers, what have you. But yeah, ultimately just focusing on like why are we drinking, I think is helpful, right? Because again, I was in a fraternity, and when I started as a cop, like that was what you do with your
yeah,
fellows, right?
yeah,
Everything was with alcohol, and you'd go out and you'd go in, you'd go to people's houses, and it's just booze, booze, booze. And when we were in mourning, it was booze. And when we lost our buddy Diego, like at my department, I got worried for a bit because I was just reflecting. I was like, man, I'm getting sincerely worried that it's going to be like a thing. And I really hope that my guys and, the periphery friends can shift away to remember and celebrate him without alcohol. Like I remember having that distinct memory, and I'm glad they did, But yeah, it's just such a thing where, again, it's not to shame, it's just to reflect on, is there something you're chasing or something you're trying to fulfill here?
yeah. And I mean, when I started my career, I drank a ton. You know what I mean? Like looking back, I can't even imagine that I did drink that much back then. You know what I mean? But now, like honestly, folks, I don't even really miss it. I know that sounds crazy, but like I'll give you the perfect example. Like we went on a cruise back in October, and I had a few drinks while we were on the cruise, and I didn't have another drink until just last week when me and my wife were in Vegas. I went months, and it wasn't even on my mind. Like it
Yeah,
wasn't like, oh man, I haven't had a drink in this many months, or oh, I want to have it. It was just not part of it. Like, and for me, a big thing is just like the calories. Like I'd much rather eat those calories than drink them.
sure.
So
Yeah.
that's just part of the reason. That's another thing. Don't drink your calories, folks, if you can help it. So switch to those 0 calorie sodas. You were talking about all these other options. They also have great 0 calorie sodas now that taste just like the real thing. A&W has a root beer, Coke Zero. They got cherry Coke now that's zero. I mean, they got all sorts of options.
Yeah. Again, know thyself. Like you see a lot of people drinking like flavored, sparkling water. Man, that's such a good substitute for so many things. Yeah, for me, when I was on Graves, right, I went back to nights electively,
Yeah.
and that was ridiculous. But as a sergeant, and I started getting that hankering, right? Like you're fatigued and you want to eat. So I actually started trying to sip on like diet soda.
Yeah.
Man, I became addicted to that so quickly, right? I would be just drinking it like room temp. Like I'd just go to
Yeah.
the grocery store and get like a 12 pack, and I would go like I'd do like a few of them in half a shift. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like again, it's not like I'm not trying to demonize diet soda, but
Yeah. No,
for
I get
me,
it.
it wasn't even like the enjoyment of it. It just became like it was like water for me. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I need to take a backpedal, right? Caffeine too, right? And I've talked about this before on my podcast and written about it, but like there was a time where I was grossly dependent on caffeine, and I was drinking 3 cups of black coffee to get going for my day, which would be going to
Yeah.
the gym for like an hour and a half, which I was so fatigued I probably had no business going to the gym. I probably should have walked around and like meditated, truly stretched or something, and tried to go back to sleep. But I was doing that on, super underslept, and I would be drinking black coffee through my entire graveyard shift to the point of driving home kind of like on the blink, on the nod, and then
Hmm.
literally crashing, not going to bed, but crashing. And so again, not trying to caffeine shame people, but to your point, Joe, yeah, I'm mindful, like it's usually the morning, and usually I'm on a day or an earlier swing shift these days.
Yeah.
And noon is kind of my cutoff, right? Unless there's something different about that day or the following. But yeah, it's a noon thing for me, or it really throws off my sleep, and that's something that I battled for years.
Yeah, and it's really a vicious cycle because like I still work night shift. I'm a night shift lieutenant, and I'm telling you, sleep. I guess we'll kind of get to that a little bit, but it's
Yeah.
like the three pillars of what you need to be worrying about if you want to get into shape, and is nutrition, which is the most important thing. Number one, that's going to be like 85% of it. The other 15% is working out, but the three pillars are nutrition, working out, and sleep. And, ideally, and people, I know as soon as I say this, everyone who's listening is going to laugh as a police officer. Ideally, you want to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And I know everyone's like, oh, that's bullshit. And again, I'm being a hypocrite because I only get like 6.5, 6 hours of sleep a night. But that feeds that vicious cycle of I'm not getting enough sleep. I need to over caffeinate. Over caffeinate hurts my sleep. And it
Mm-hmm.
just goes on and on and on.
And
So
you
really
eat
try to,
crap, yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so on,
And
right?
so,
Your
and,
workouts
and,
suck, yeah.
and sleeping is going to help you recover from your workouts. So, like, make sure you got blackout curtains. Make sure you're sleeping where it's very cool. You know, you're going to want to turn the AC down. You know, try to eliminate that caffeine, 7, 8 hours, whatever it is from bed so that you can really get a good night's sleep. And it's so funny, too, because, like, we'll talk about, like, departments that have, like, wellness programs, where they're like, oh, we care about you. We have a peer support program. And it's like, my favorite of all of these is when they have you at an 8 a.m. class and the first topic is an hour on sleep deprivation, but yet I'm night shift. You don't even offer a class in the evening time. So it's like,
Oh, man,
you gotta be
yeah.
kidding me. Like,
Yeah.
we definitely care about you getting enough sleep, but oh, by the way, get your ass here at 8 a.m. and we're not going to give you the night off the night before. It's
Mhm.
just, come on.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing, and I've been known, we have per our contract, there's 8 hours between shifts. So if you have court or something, it's 8 hours, but yeah, something a few of us sergeants would socialize is like, "Hey, cut your guys out early if you can, as
Yeah.
long as it's not blowing up." And as commander now, which is a way more formal, less cool, same thing as LT. I love the LT, right? Because it's like still approachable, but
Yeah.
commander, it's like, ugh. But anyway, yeah, like wearing very much your same role right now as like a watch commander is like, I tell my guys, tell my sergeants, I'm like, hey, that is what the contract says we need to give them. But like, you use your discretion and please, like, and a lot of times I'll insert, I'm like, hey, I really hope that you take some time. And because 8 hours between shifts is not enough to commute and to change and like go to bed and get up and come, you know what I mean? Like, you're
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
shaving off down to like 6 at max for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I go to roll call every single night. And, one of the things I do is I scan the faces of all my guys and gals. And sometimes you can just tell when you see someone's face, and like everybody who works night shift knows exactly what I'm talking about right now, where it's just like they did not get enough sleep. They look terrible and they look like they're about to fall asleep at any moment. They're not optimal to go hit the streets. So what I'll do is I'll call them aside and just say, hey, you all right? Like, did you get enough sleep? Blah, blah, blah. And, of course, I always, oh, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. I said, you want to go home tonight? I said, don't even worry about it. We'll send you home right now, get a good night's sleep, blah, blah, blah. And half of them will take me up on it and just say, like, yeah, I'm just there. But, like, as a supervisor, like, you took this responsibility. Like, nobody else asked you to take the test. So care about your people. Like, actually care about them. Ask them how they're doing. Keep an eye on them. If they look off like that, give them the night off. Like, I get it. We're all short staffed and everything like that, but try to care about them as much as possible and be nice to them. Like, our job is hard enough right now. Don't be an asshole to your people. Like, just treat them like human beings. Make sure you're putting them in for commendations. What this younger generation of officers wants more than anything right now is to be told that they're doing a good job
Mm-hmm.
and that their job actually matters.
Yeah.
And when you, as a supervisor, just shit all over them for no reason other than you have rank and they don't, whatever, it's horrible. And those
Mm-hmm.
are the same people that will complain all day long about the chief didn't do this and the chief does this and, they're affecting morale. Well, guess what? You can affect morale too. And not only that, it's your responsibility because, well, again, nobody told you to become a supervisor. It's your responsibility to try to keep that morale up because something every police department forgets about is that happy workers are hard workers. And
Yeah.
instead, departments feel like if we just keep them under our thumb and we just press them harder, they're going to work hard. When has that ever worked in the history
Ever.
of the
Ever.
workforce? Never.
Yeah.
Treat them
Yeah.
like human beings. You be nice to them. Support them. That's how you get hard workers.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, yeah, it sounds so rudimentary, right? But even if you don't really care about people, if you want the product done, if you want the mission accomplished, like we should know that unequivocally, man, I struggle with that one.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah, so like our people are our most valuable resource. Have the last few years not proven that, right? How do you do policing without police officers? Like you can have the fanciest whatever fleet of cars, and oftentimes that's a challenge too. Supply chain, go figure. But
Yeah.
you can have everything, right? But like, what good does a giant roll call room with a bunch of gun belts in the closet and a parking lot or a parking garage full of cars do if no one's there to sit in those seats and drive those cars and wear those belts? Like, come on, right? So we've seen, and slowly we're kind of crawling out of our low point that we saw in the last couple of years. It's still a struggle a lot of places, but man, how can we not recognize that we just need to treat our people better, make them feel supported to do the job that not enough people of caliber want to do?
Yeah, and it's funny too because departments, as I talked about, will talk about how they have a wellness program, they have peer support, and they talk about the impact on officers' mental health, and they'll say you have all these outside factors that are impacting your mental health, and all of these outside things, and it's like, hold on, chiefs, how about we just turn that mirror on yourself and look at what can you do that was within your control to increase morale and make officers' mental health better? I don't know. Here's an idea. Maybe we should stop disciplining people for conduct not alleged on body camera, where some person, for those who don't know, if you're not a police officer, a person will come in and make a complaint saying, this officer beat me up and cursed me out. Well, guess what? We have body cameras now. Turns out the officer didn't do any of that. But the officer was doing 10 miles over the speed limit when driving to the scene. So the chief gives him a day off. Or
Mm,
they click their seatbelt 30 seconds after they left the scene, so they give them a day off. Whatever it is that they may find. Do you understand how much that kills morale? So here's an idea. Maybe stop doing that. Also, maybe we should stop disciplining officers when they're in a minor fender bender at work. Like,
mm,
we still do discipline in police departments the way they did it 70 years ago. Let's take money out of people's pockets when they make a mistake. Private sector doesn't even do that anymore. And yet we continue with this archaic discipline system. And who are you hurting when you take money out of that officer's pocket? The officer's family. He's not going to be able to take his kids on vacation or not be able to buy his wife the new purse she wants or buy the husband the new beer subscription he wants, whatever it may be. So, for police chiefs that may be watching, like, think about your people and how you can better handle these things. We could give them training. We could have them retrained on something. We could have them ride with a partner to figure out how to get better at writing a report, whatever the issue
mm-hmm.
may be. But my God, think a little bit outside of the box, and maybe we can actually start building up morale so that officers believe, okay, they actually do care about me a little bit. And oh, by the way, caveat, I'm not saying don't discipline officers when they commit a crime or they use excessive force. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying for all this other minor shit, we can handle it differently than just suspending officers and making sure they can't go to the assignment that they want to go to.
Yeah, and part of what I want to talk to you is because you are command level, right? So we're mid management. It's actually not as impactful as you think it might be to those below listening, but it is, right? There's an opportunity. A lot of times it is passing the message up or passing it down, but everyone has a part to play, right? Everyone
Mhm.
has, like you said, everyone has a piece of culture and morale. And so if you do have an antiquated system where it's like, hey, every mistake equals this, I mean, I think I'd like to think that we're getting in a better direction where, at least for my department, like, you evaluate each thing, and usually
Mhm.
like a fender bender, it'll be a first line or a traffic unit that investigates that and sends the info up. And we look at the history, right, for the last 2 years and say, hey, how many were preventable, non-preventable? And then there is a standard as far as like escalation, and it starts with like a warning, right? Like, just, hey, don't do that. But key, I think that maybe your FOP hat would roll in with this is, it doesn't do, or maybe just leadership, right? It doesn't do much just to say someone messed up without giving them the information, the knowledge, and the tools to improve, and the
Yeah.
resource and the time, right? And so, yeah, I think that rolls right back in with the generational conversation, right? Where I literally, I'm technically a millennial. I'm 38, but I had a conversation relatively recently with an officer of the same amount of time. We're roughly the same age, but he's like, yeah, these guys, they're coming to me and they're asking like, hey, do you know if I'm doing a good job? Because Sarge isn't really saying anything.
Yeah.
And to the guy's point, he's like, yeah, man, if you're not hearing anything, then you're doing a good job. And he was kind of laughing it off. But I was like, man, it wouldn't take much for us to tell them when they're doing a good job. And he actually pushed back on me. He's like, man, we don't need to hear if we're doing a good job. I was like, yes, you do. He's
Yeah.
like, well, I don't. I was like, maybe you don't, but they're literally asking for it, right? And so I'm not saying reward people for doing like the minimum, but there's a lot of times where people go above and beyond, and maybe even that's even just effort, right? There's a lot of times where I can look at a probationary officer or like a 2-year officer where truly they're doing way better and they're more squared away than I was, or than, me, maybe even their peers. Why not elevate that or highlight that? Why not celebrate that? Because then everyone else is watching like, oh, cool. You want that? We'll do more of that. Or we'll try to do
Yeah.
more of that, right? It's just a simple reward system.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost you anything to be nice to them,
Hmm.
and to treat them with respect. But you're right, there is a generational thing because I still remember there was an older captain, and there was these officers that caught like some good robbery suspects, and they got guns, and they got this, and they got that, and I was like, oh man, we got to write up a nice commendation. He's like, why are you going to write up a commendation? And I'm like, because they did a good job. And he goes, well, that's their job. Their job is to catch robbery suspects. I go, it's also their job to go into an active shooter. It's also their job to give up their life for someone who's at risk. But like, we should still acknowledge the fact that they did an amazing job, and like, write them up for a commendation, folks. Like, departments damn sure write people up when they make mistakes, but it should be like 20-1 commendations to complaints. And
Mm.
that's something I do is whenever we do these commendations, I always let them know in roll call, like, hey, we wrote up so and so for a commendation. They did this, or a citizen called in and said this officer did a good job, so that they hear that constant positive reinforcement that they are appreciated. And I'm sure my own people, I have a great night shift, great guys and gals. They work their tails off. I always joke that I will put them up against any night shift in the entire country. That's how much pride I have. I would literally tell them, I'm proud to be your lieutenant for the
Yeah.
job that they do. And I'm sure they almost get tired of hearing it because I'm constantly telling them, but I want them to know, like, maybe no one else appreciates it. I'm sure they do, but I damn sure appreciate it. So I'm going to tell them.
Yeah. I like that. It just reminded me, like, literally 2 days ago, I was talking to my daughter and I was saying that I loved her, right? And I was just sitting and watching her eat breakfast, and it's something I'm trying to be intentional about, right?
Yeah.
And, it's becoming a joke, right? Where she just like looks at me, she's like, okay. And I was like, do you know that I love you? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, how do you know? I was like, well, you tell me a lot. I was like, is it by the way I show you? She's like, yeah. She's like, you don't have to tell me. I know. I was like, oh, but I'm going to tell you. Just watch. I was like, for the
Yeah.
next years, you're going to remember, we're going to have this conversation over and over where you're going to say, you don't have to tell me. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to always tell you. Right. So I do this a lot in my head ever since being a sergeant. But, I was a sergeant before I had a kid. And then there's so many comparisons of parenting to leadership. And I don't want people to take it the wrong way, but it is
Caveats.
yeah, it is caring. And when you're a parent, you're a leader, right? And when you're a teacher, you're a leader. And so that does all blend together when you're supervising, or it should. And so these parallels make a lot of sense, right? When you're saying, hey, let's reward behavior, good behavior, let's acknowledge and validate and show value for our people. And that should be more than criticizing. That's certainly something that I could improve in, right? Like I like to send emails to the sergeants and then CC the guys, right? And I like to write letters, but could I do more? Yeah. Does it take time? Yes. Does it take away from all the admin tasks? Sure. But it's necessary, right? And so to that point, just like parenting, like, are you an effective parent if you say 5 things your kid did wrong and you tell them every so often, like, what they did that was okay?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. And when you have those opportunities too, like as a supervisor who may be supervising somebody who's 20 years younger than you, like, I supervise like 65 people, and a lot of these officers are like super young, and take opportunities if you can to like pass wisdom to them as well. It doesn't always have to be about like law enforcement stuff. You can give them life advice, you can give them financial advice, you can give them eating advice, working out advice, like, or just mistakes you made in the past. Like, don't be afraid either to tell them about mistakes you made in your
Mm,
career so
yep.
that they can learn from them. Like, it's okay for them to see that you're not perfect. You know what I mean? I think too many people, by the way, folks, if you're watching, perfection is an illusion. It's okay to strive for it, but don't think I have to be perfect in any aspect of your life. I chased that for years in my early 30s where I thought I had to be perfect with everything. And it leads to a significant amount of stress and anxiety because you want everything to be it's complete illusion. Don't fall into the trap. Okay to strive for, but you're not always going to get it. But pass that wisdom on, because you're teaching them life lessons. And this is something that, like, I love being a dad. When my life is over, I don't care if anybody remembers me for anything other than just he was a great father to his kids. That's all I care about. And as long as just my daughters say that, I don't even need anybody else to say it. As long as they believe that I was a great father to them. But part of what I do is like trying to pass on this wisdom now to them. Because like my dad never sat me down and had talks about like why people act a certain way, why people are hating on people, why is this and by the way, if you have haters, just remember, no one ever hates on someone doing worse than them. So they're
Mm.
hating on you for a reason because you're doing something right. So
Oh
just keep
man.
doing what you're doing. Uh,
There are
but,
some vicious people that like to punch down. But yeah, for the
oh,
most
yeah.
part, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But pass on that wisdom to your kids too. Have those conversations because you're ultimately going to develop like just more critical thinking kids that understand things better, and you're ultimately going to have a better time with them too because they're just going to understand the world a little bit better. And I mean, I just have a blast spending time with my girls. It's the best part of my life.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. I do want to rewind back because you said, hey, not only is it okay to share your mistakes, I would say it's ideal, right?
Yeah,
Because we talk about trust and leadership requires trust, and trust is built by communication. And a lot of times that's most effective by being vulnerable. And right. And I think that I would venture to guess there's a lot of people that see your public platform and they can learn more about LT, from seeing you because it's they could look at your Instagram, they could hear this interview, and they learn a lot more about LT Gamaldi than they have in their limited time, right? And maybe if
yeah,
they're new, they certainly don't have the reps or the history, but they can hear where you're coming from as a dude that's trying to be a cop and do all these things and being a dad, right? And so I try to make that attempt too, right? At the risk of, I'm already starting to be like, man, I sound like the commanders I remember like back in the day. So I try to caveat that like, hey, this is not supposed to be a story like that. This is supposed to be,
yeah,
hey, I'm talking about this thing that could be labeled as an issue or an opportunity for you to improve. And it's coming from a place of I did the same thing. Or
yeah,
here's my foot pursuit story that I cringe and I'm gonna cringe and be embarrassed when I tell you about it but I tell you because I want you to know it's not from a place of judgment. It's from a place of understanding. And like you're on fire, you want to get the guy. I love that, but we got to toggle it down because safety. Like this is why I did that was extremely unsafe. And I did that kind of thing a lot. And I'm glad nothing bad happened. And I'm glad nothing bad happened to you. And so this is just a conversation, right? So that's huge. But man, one thing I want to be mindful of your time. Maybe the last question I'll ask you is someone noted to me, and it's something that I think it's pretty obvious, from the time I was an officer, but we talk about wellness, we talk about health and modeling and leadership. You're doing a great job as a lieutenant, but that is not common amongst our peers in command level or executive level. And so I want to know your thoughts and maybe encouragement or a challenge to command staff and how we can demonstrate wellness because that certainly is going to trickle down.
yeah. I think as a leader of any department or anything like that, is that you you wanted this position. You wanted to be the head guy or near the top or whatever, or you want to be a sergeant, you want to be a lieutenant, whatever it is. You made that decision. You have to treat your people the way that you want them to then in turn treat the citizens. Because you'll have chiefs and lieutenants and sergeants who treat their officers like crap, but then expect those officers to go out and treat citizens with the utmost respect, which is our job and most of the officers are going to do. But you're not even modeling that behavior within your own agency. And as officers, we all need to do a better job of just treating each other better. Police officers, you can walk through the hallway, you say hello to somebody, and they don't even lift their head. Like, what the hell's your problem? Like, we're all a part of the same family here. It doesn't cost anything to be nice to one another. I'm not saying you got to be best friends because of their personalities and everything else. To your point about like physical and mental wellness is like as a chief, I get it. You want to be like, hey, I have peer support, therefore I've checked that box. We have to talk about changing the entire culture of law enforcement. That means you're having in service classes on nutrition, physical fitness, sleep deprivation, and you're constantly messaging that, and you're also molding your department accordingly to it. So you know what? Instead of having a physical fitness test that if you don't pass this, you're going to be fired. At our department, and good on them for being more progressive, but it was actually us at the union who brought this to the negotiating table. If you pass the physical fitness test, which I did this morning, by the way, I got up early
No,
and did.
congrats.
You can thank you. You get $1,000, or you get an extra 5 days off as an officer, or 4 days off as a supervisor.
That's
So
legit.
yeah, it's
The time
awesome, and
off
it
is
motivates.
legit. Yeah.
Yeah, and it motivates people to get in shape. So do something like that instead of saying, "I'm going to fire your ass if you can't pass the physical agility test." Because once again, you're just shaming that person. And you know what? I can get most people in shape just well enough to pass that test, and they're not making any real changes in their life to have a better life. You can't tell people that I care about your health and wellness, but also I'm going to make you work doubles and I'm going to cancel your days off just because we're a little bit low in staffing. Like, it doesn't work like that. So you have to have or you're disciplining people for no reason, vastly impacting their mental health, or you're dragging out internal investigations 6, 7, 8 months. Instead, you could get it done in 2 months where they're not living with that stress. So if you're a leader, if you're a chief, don't just check the box for wellness and say, I care. Show people that you care. Make an entire culture change at your department so that officers know you actually give a shit about them. And as we talked about, ultimately your people are going to be healthier and they're going to work harder for you. They're going to want to run through a brick wall because they know that you care about them. And too often the higher ups, I feel, and this is my opinion, they just want to check the box and keep it moving.
Yeah, I feel like it's so hard, and it's hard to empathize, right? Especially for the officer level. Like, I've been there, but when I say that, like, our command staff's not well, and like I get it, right? Like, there you get sucked in so many meetings, and you get so many admin tasks, and so just getting a taste of it, I'm like, man, that sounds rough. I do not envy those guys and gals that are up in that lane, but I think that you brought up a lot of good points, right? It's that you got to model that. And I love reminding myself and those around me, like, hey, like, whatever job it is that you have of any rank, your job is to take care of your people so that they can, project that out, right? Because it is caring for your people, and you're modeling that, hopefully, and that, in not just hopefully, but it will manifest into them caring for the community a certain way, right? And
Yeah.
the kind of attitude that you inject into how you do your job with your people will permeate into how they're doing their day to day with each other and with the community, which is like that's the mutual goal that we all have, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Joe. Well, we covered a lot of ground, and I don't want to keep you away from your caffeine because I feel like your energy's starting to dip. But yeah, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can follow along with what you're doing, the content you're putting out.
Sure, sure. You can follow me on Instagram at Joe Gamaldi. That's where I have a lot of police stuff on there, but I also have a lot of health and fitness stuff. If you want just police stuff and just going to war, you can follow me on Twitter at Joe Gamaldi, which is like a cesspool of angry people coming at me at all angles. But you can follow me there too. And if I can leave everybody with just a parting message, it's like, it's so easy in law enforcement for us to just be negative and be cynical, but that's easy to be that way. So
Mm.
let's try to be positive. Let's be passionate about the things we care about, and let's just try to make it the best ride it can be. And let's make sure we're putting ourselves in the best position that we can be in on the back end of our career so that we can enjoy that retirement that we so richly earned, not
Hmm.
deserve. We earned it.
Yeah, you worked for that. Like, let's
Yep,
draw every penny out of that pension, right? Like,
for
not like
sure.
5, 8 years. That's not enough. That's saddening.
No.
So yeah, not to detract, but 100% preach, man, because I feel like I had a gift in being able to interact with and recruit in the last couple of years prior to my current assignment, and just to be reminded, and then tell other people that we should all be reminded, like, there are people out there, they want to do what you have the ability to do, right? They're
Mhm.
watching the news, and you might feel handcuffed, you might feel so cynical at times, and that's warranted, but it's not going to help you to stay in that space, right? You have the power to do so much that the average person cannot, despite legislation, despite judicial process, right? Like, you that doesn't sound weird. No, I'm not saying go Judge Dredd. I'm saying despite judicial or prosecutorial changes, right? You still have a gun and a badge and the law and the due care and the oath, right? To do what you can with what you have. And
Yep.
so just a reminder, yeah, absolutely. Let's keep it positive. And I appreciate that. Your message, man, and all these tangible things that guys and gals can do.
Thanks for having me on, brother. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.